The crisp autumn air carried a chill that seeped through Sarah Harper's coat as she hurried down the bustling street. Her breath fogged up the window of her favorite cafe, where she stopped every morning before heading to work. It was a ritual, a small slice of calm in her otherwise chaotic life. As a graphic designer working long hours at a demanding job, Sarah barely had time for herself. But this cafe, with its warm lighting and comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, felt like home. She pushed open the glass door and stepped inside, instantly greeted by the familiar hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. The line wasn't too long today, which was a relief. Sarah glanced at her watch. She had exactly 15 minutes to grab her usual latte and still make it to the office on time. She shuffled forward, pulling out her wallet as she approached the counter. That's when she noticed him. Standing behind her in the queue was a man who looked completely out of place. His clothes were old and worn, patched together in spots, and his shoes were scuffed beyond repair. A thick stubble covered his face and his hair was unkempt, sticking out in odd directions. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper in one hand while nervously fidgeting with the other. Something about him tugged at Sarah's heartstrings. Maybe it was the way he kept glancing around, avoiding eye contact with anyone, or how tightly he gripped that scrap of paper, as if it held some secret importance. When it was finally his turn to order, Sarah heard him mutter something under his breath to the barista. "Just a black coffee," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, almost hesitant, as though he didn't want to draw attention to himself. The barista nodded, punching. In the order before announcing the total, $2.50, the man froze. For a moment there was an awkward silence. He reached into his pocket, fishing around for coins. Then he pulled out a handful, dimes, nickels, and a few stray pennies, and began counting them on the counter. His fingers trembled slightly as he tried to add them up. Sarah watched from the corner of her eye, pretending to browse the menu board above the register. She could see the frustration building in his expression, the embarrassment creeping onto his face as people behind him started shifting impatiently. "Here," she said suddenly, stepping forward before she even realized what she was doing. Startled, both the man and the barista turned to look at her. Sarah smiled warmly, holding up a $5 bill. "Let me get that for you." The man blinked, clearly taken aback. "Oh no, I couldn't," he began, shaking his head. "It's okay," Sarah interrupted gently. "Really, it's no big deal." She handed the money to the barista, who gave her a quick nod of thanks before finishing the transaction. Turning back to the man, she added, "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." He hesitated for a second longer, then nodded slowly, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the noise of the cafe. I won't forget this." Sarah shrugged, trying to play it off casually. "Don't mention it. Have a good day, all right?" With that, she moved aside to wait for her own drink, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and curiosity. Who was this man? Why did he seem so lost? And why did helping him feel like such a natural thing to do? As she sipped her latte later, sitting at a small table near the window, Sarah couldn't shake the image of the man from her mind. There was something haunting about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Still, she reminded herself that everyone has their struggles, and maybe all he needed was a tiny bit of kindness to brighten his day. After all, wasn't that what humanity was supposed to be about? Helping each other, even in the smallest ways? Little did Sarah know, however, that her simple act of generosity would set off a chain of events far greater than she could ever imagine. For now, though, she simply gathered her things, zipped up her coat, and headed out into the cold morning air, ready to face another day of deadlines and designs. What she didn't realize was that someone unexpected, was watching her closely, silently noting the warmth in her smile and the sincerity in her actions. The week passed in a blur for Sarah. Between juggling client meetings, designing logos, and meeting tight deadlines, she barely had time to think about the man from the cafe. Life went on as usual. Early mornings, late nights, and cups of coffee that fueled her through it all. But deep down she couldn't shake the memory of him, His tired eyes, his quiet gratitude, and the way he seemed so out of place lingered in her mind like a faint echo. It wasn't until Friday evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, that something unusual happened. As Sarah unlocked the door to her small apartment, she noticed an envelope lying on the floor. It was plain white, unmarked except for her name, written neatly in blue ink. Sarah Harper. Curious, she picked it up and turned it over. There was no stamp or address. Someone must have slipped it under her door. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this some kind of prank? Or worse, a bill she'd forgotten about? She hesitated for a moment before tearing open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly in half. With a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, she unfolded it and began to read. Dear Sarah, I wanted to thank you for your kindness at the cafe last week. You may not remember me. I was the man who couldn't pay for my coffee. But I haven't forgotten what you did. In a world where people often look away, you chose to help without expecting anything in return. That small act meant more to me than you can imagine. If you're willing, I'd like to meet you tomorrow at noon at the same cafe where we crossed paths. No strings attached, just a chance to talk. If you decide not to come, I'll understand. Completely. Sincerely, J.M. Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. Who was J.M.? And why would he go through the trouble of writing her a letter? The handwriting was neat and deliberate, giving off an air of thoughtfulness. Part of her wondered if this was some elaborate scam, but another part, the part that still believed in the goodness of people, felt drawn to the idea of meeting him. After all, what harm could come from grabbing a cup of coffee? She spent the rest of the evening debating whether to go. On one hand, she was curious. What could this man possibly want to say to her? On the other hand, she worried about wasting her precious Saturday afternoon on a stranger. But as she lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, she realized she didn't have much to lose. If nothing else, it might be interesting to hear his story. The next morning, Sarah woke up earlier than usual. She dressed casually, choosing a pair of jeans and a cozy sweater, and made her way to the cafe. The streets were alive with the sounds of weekend activity, children laughing, dogs barking, and street musicians playing cheerful tunes. Despite the lively atmosphere, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. What if this turned out to be a waste of time, or worse, what if it was some kind of trick? When she arrived at the cafe, she scanned the room, searching for any sign of the man from the note. At first, she didn't see anyone who matched his description. Just as she was beginning to doubt herself, her eyes landed on a figure sitting alone at a corner table. He looked different this time, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp shirt and tie, and carrying himself with an air of confidence she hadn't noticed before. For a moment, she wondered if she had the wrong person. But then their eyes met, and he smiled warmly, gesturing for her to join him. "Sarah?" he asked as she approached, standing up to greet her. His voice was smooth and steady, nothing like the hesitant tone she remembered from the cafe. "Yes," she replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "You're J.M., I assume?" He nodded, extending his hand. "Jonathan Monroe. Please, sit down." His manners were impeccable, and there was a genuine warmth in his smile that put her at ease. As she settled into the chair across from him, he added, "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure if you'd show up." "To be honest, I wasn't sure either," Sarah admitted with a small laugh. "Your note was unexpected." "I can imagine," Jonathan said, leaning back in his chair. "Let me start by saying how much I appreciate what you did for me last week. It's rare to encounter someone who acts with such sincerity these days." Sarah shrugged modestly. "It was just a cup of coffee. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Jonathan countered gently. "That's the thing. Most people wouldn't have noticed, or if they did, they might have chosen to look away. You didn't. And that's why I wanted to meet you, to thank you properly." His words caught her off guard. She hadn't thought much about her actions that day. It had simply felt like the right thing to do. Yet here was this man treating her kindness as though it were something extraordinary. It made her feel both proud and slightly uncomfortable. "So," she said after a pause, "what brings you here today? Besides thanking me, I mean." Jonathan chuckled softly as if he'd been waiting for her to ask. "I'll get to that. But first let me tell you a little about myself. I'm sure you're wondering why someone who couldn't afford a cup of coffee is now sitting here looking like—" He gestured to his polished appearance, and Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Something like that," she admitted. "Well," he began, his expression growing serious. "The truth is, I wasn't always in the position I'm in now. I built my life from scratch, worked hard, took risks, and eventually I became successful. Very successful, actually. But along the way, I started to lose sight of the things that mattered most: compassion, empathy, humanity." Sarah listened intently, intrigued by his story. There was a depth to his words, a vulnerability that resonated with her. "That's why I decided to conduct a little experiment," Jonathan continued. "I wanted to see if genuine kindness still existed in the world, or if everyone acted only when there was something to gain. So I disguised myself, went to places like that cafe, and observed how people reacted when I appeared to need help. Out of dozens of encounters, yours stood out. Not because you gave me money, but because you did it without hesitation, without judgment. You reminded me of something I almost forgot, that goodness still exists in people." Sarah blinked, taken aback by his revelation. "Wow," she said softly. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jonathan replied with a reassuring smile. "Just know that your actions made a bigger impact than you realize." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of conversation in the cafe faded into the yao background as Sarah processed everything he had said. This man, a complete stranger, had gone out of his way to express gratitude for something she hadn't thought twice about. It was humbling and strangely inspiring. As they sat there, sipping their coffees and chatting further, Sarah couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. Maybe the world wasn't as cold and indifferent as it sometimes seemed. And maybe, just maybe, her small act of kindness had sparked something far greater than she could have ever imagined. The conversation at the cafe flowed effortlessly, like two old friends catching up after years apart. Jonathan Monroe was an engaging storyteller, weaving tales of his journey from rags to riches with a humility that surprised Sarah. He spoke about growing up in a small town, working odd jobs to support his family, and eventually stumbling upon a business idea that changed his life forever. But what struck Sarah most was how he emphasized the importance of staying grounded, something he admitted he had struggled with as success piled up. "I got so caught up in building my empire," Jonathan confessed, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "that I forgot why I started in the first place. I wanted to make a difference, not just for myself, but for others. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that." Sarah nodded, understanding more than she let on. She knew what it was like to feel disconnected from your purpose, especially when life became a whirlwind of responsibilities and expectations. "It's easy to lose yourself when you're trying to keep up with everything," she said softly. "I think we all go through that at some point." Jonathan smiled, appreciating her insight. "Exactly, and that's why I decided to step back and reevaluate. My experiment wasn't just about testing people, it was also about finding someone who reminded me of the values I once held dear, someone genuine, empathetic, and willing to help without expecting anything in return." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "That's why I'm here, Sarah, to offer you an opportunity." Sarah froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "An opportunity?" she repeated, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "Yes," Jonathan said, leaning forward slightly. "You see, I recently sold my company, a tech startup, for a significant amount of money. With that, I've been focusing on giving back. I founded a charitable foundation aimed at supporting underprivileged communities, helping them gain access to education, healthcare, and housing. It's still in its early stages, but it has immense potential." Sarah listened intently, her curiosity piqued. "That sounds amazing," she said sincerely. "But what does this have to do with me?" Jonathan chuckled lightly as if he'd anticipated her question. Here's the thing. Running a foundation like this requires someone special, someone who understands the value of compassion, who can connect with people on a human level, and who isn't afraid to think outside the box. When I saw how you handled that situation at the cafe, I knew you were exactly the kind of person I'd been looking for. Sarah blinked, momentarily overwhelmed. Wait, are you offering me a job? In a sense, yes, Jonathan replied. I want you to lead the operations of my foundation. You'll oversee projects, manage teams, and ensure our initiatives have the greatest possible impact. It's not an easy role, and it will require a lot of hard work. But I believe you have the qualities needed to make it successful. For a moment, Sarah didn't know how to respond. The offer was flattering, even exhilarating, but also daunting. Leading a charitable foundation? That was worlds away from designing logos and meeting client deadlines. What did she know about philanthropy or managing large-scale projects? I don't know what to say, she stammered finally. This is such an incredible opportunity, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. I mean, I've never done anything like this before. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm and reassuring. Qualifications aren't everything, Sarah. Skills can be learned, experience gained. What matters most is your heart. Your ability to care deeply about people and your creativity in solving problems. Those are traits that can't be taught, and they're exactly what this foundation needs. His words struck a chord within her. For years, Sarah had felt stuck in her career, longing for something more meaningful, but unsure how to find it. Now here was a chance to step into a role that could truly make a difference. Still, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. What if I mess it up, she asked quietly. What if I'm not good enough? Jonathan smiled warmly. No one expects perfection, least of all me. All I ask is that you bring your best self to the table. Trust me, Sarah, you won't be alone in this. I'll be there every step of the way to guide and support you. This isn't just about hiring someone, it's about building a partnership. The sincerity in his voice melted away some of her hesitation. She took a deep breath, realizing that opportunities like this didn't come around often. If she turned it down, she might spend the rest of her life wondering what if. On the other hand, saying yes meant stepping into the unknown, a leap of faith she wasn't sure she was ready for. Can I think about it? She asked cautiously. Of course, Jonathan replied without missing a beat. Take all the time you need. I wouldn't expect you to make such a big decision on the spot. Just know that the offer stands, and I truly believe you'd excel in this role. They talked for a while longer, discussing the foundation's goals and the kinds of projects Sarah might oversee. By the time they parted ways, Sarah's head was spinning with possibilities. As she walked home, the city streets buzzing with energy, she couldn't stop thinking about what Jonathan had said. Could she really do this? Was she brave enough to take a risk and embrace something completely new? That night, Sarah sat by her window, staring out at the glittering lights of the city skyline. Her thoughts swirled like leaves caught in a breeze. The idea of leading a charitable foundation was thrilling, but it also scared her. What if she failed? What if she disappointed Jonathan, or worse, the people counting on the foundation to improve their lives? And yet, amidst the fear, there was a spark of excitement. A tiny voice inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the chance she'd been waiting for. An opportunity to use her talents for something greater than herself. To leave a mark on the world in a way she'd never imagined possible. She drifted off to sleep. One thing became clear. No matter how uncertain the future seemed, Sarah knew she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. The uncertainty that had clouded her mind the night before seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet resolve. She knew what she had to do. Picking up her phone, she sent Jonathan a simple text. I'll take the job. Within minutes, he replied with a single word. Perfect. Followed by a time and place for their first official meeting. A new beginning. Sarah's first day at the foundation's office was overwhelming in the best possible way. Located in a modern building downtown, The space buzzed with energy. Walls were adorned with colorful posters showcasing past projects, photos of smiling children receiving school supplies, families moving into newly built homes, and volunteers, distributing food to communities in need. It was inspiring but also intimidating. How could she possibly live up to the impact this organization had already made? Jonathan greeted her warmly when she arrived, introducing her to the team. There was Mia, a passionate project manager who specialized in educational programs, Raj, a data analyst dedicated to measuring the foundation's success, and Elena, a community liaison who worked directly with beneficiaries. Each member of the team brought something unique to the table, and Sarah quickly realized they weren't just colleagues. They were a family. "You're going to fit right in," Jonathan said confidently as he handed her a thick binder filled with reports, budgets, and project plans. "Take your time to get familiar with everything. And remember, I'm here if you need anything." Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into learning every aspect of the foundation's operations. She attended meetings, reviewed grant proposals, and visited project sites to see firsthand how the funds were being used. At first, it was daunting. Terms like allocation matrices and impact metrics sounded like a foreign language, and she often found herself staying late to catch up on reading or asking endless questions during lunch breaks. But slowly, things began to click. After noon, while visiting a local community center funded by the foundation, Sarah met a young girl named Lily. Barely 10 years old, Lily had big dreams of becoming a doctor someday. However, her family struggled to afford even basic necessities, let alone school fees. Thanks to a scholarship program run by the foundation, Lily now attended a nearby private school where she excelled academically. As Lily proudly showed Sarah drawings she'd made of human organs, explaining each one in detail, Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she had taken the job, to help people like Lily reach their full potential. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly fulfilled. Her work wasn't just a paycheck anymore. It was a purpose. Facing challenges, but not everything went smoothly. As Sarah delved deeper into her role, she encountered challenges she hadn't anticipated. One of the biggest hurdles came in the form of skepticism from some of the beneficiaries. Many had grown wary of charities promising change but delivering little more than empty gestures. Convincing them that the foundation was different took time and patience. During one particularly difficult meeting, a group of parents voiced their frustrations about a housing project that had fallen behind schedule. "We've heard these promises before," one woman said sharply. "How do we know you won't disappear once the cameras are gone?" Sarah listened carefully, resisting the urge to defend herself immediately. Instead, she asked questions, seeking to understand their concerns fully. When she finally spoke, her tone was calm but firm. "I hear you," she said, "and I promise you, we're committed to seeing this through. If there's anything specific you feel is missing or needs improvement, tell me. We're here to listen." Her willingness to engage openly earned their respect, and over time, trust began to grow. By involving the community directly in decision-making processes, Sarah ensured that their voices were heard and valued. Slowly but surely, progress resumed, and the housing project was completed ahead of schedule. Another challenge came from within the foundation itself. Some team members questioned Sarah's leadership, especially since she lacked traditional experience in philanthropy. During a tense strategy session, Raj raised concerns about her approach to reallocating funds. "For a new initiative, we don't have the data yet to justify this shift," he argued. "What if it backfires?" Sarah understood his point but stood her ground. "Sometimes, you have to take calculated risks to create real change," she explained. "Let's pilot the program on a smaller scale and gather feedback. If it works, we can expand. If not, we'll adjust." Her confidence inspired the team to give her ideas a chance. To everyone's surprise, the pilot program exceeded expectations, leading to a significant increase in participation rates among target communities. From that moment on, even the skeptics began to see Sarah in a new light. Finding balance despite her growing success, Sarah struggled to find balance between her professional and personal life. Long hours at the office left little time for relaxation or socializing. Friends noticed she rarely accepted invitations anymore, and her apartment often felt empty and quiet. One evening, after another late night at work, Jonathan stopped by unexpectedly. He found her slumped over her desk, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "Hey," he said gently, setting down a bag of takeout. "You look like you could use a break." Sarah laughed weakly. "Tell me about it. I didn't realize running a foundation would be this exhausting." "It's not supposed to consume you," Jonathan replied, pulling up a chair. "Remember why you started this? To make a difference, yes, but also to live a fuller life. You can't pour from an empty cup, Sarah," his words hit home. Over dinner, they talked about ways she could better manage her workload without sacrificing her well-being. Jonathan suggested delegating tasks more effectively and setting boundaries to ensure she had time for herself. He also encouraged her to lean on the team instead of trying to handle everything alone. Taking his advice to heart, Sarah began making small changes. She scheduled regular walks during lunch breaks, started saying no to non-essential meetings, and carved out weekends for hobbies she'd neglected. These adjustments didn't just improve her mood, they made her more effective at work too. With renewed energy, she tackled challenges head-on, finding innovative solutions that impressed even the most seasoned members of the team. Building confidence. By the end of her first year, Sarah had transformed not only the foundation, but also herself. What had once seemed impossible now felt natural. She navigated complex negotiations with ease, inspired donors with compelling presentations, and fostered partnerships that expanded the foundation's reach exponentially. Under her leadership, the organization launched groundbreaking initiatives, including a mentorship program pairing professionals with underserved youth and a mobile health clinic bringing medical care to remote areas. Through it all, Jonathan remained a steady source of support, cheering her on and reminding her of her strengths whenever self-doubt crept in. "You've come so far," he told her during their annual review. "This foundation wouldn't be where it is today without you." Sarah smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had started this journey unsure of her abilities, but now she knew she was capable of far more than she'd ever imagined. The lessons she'd learned about resilience, empathy, and the power of collaboration would stay with her forever. As she looked around the room at the faces of her team, all working together toward a shared vision, Sarah realized something profound. This wasn't just her achievement. It belonged to everyone who believed in the mission. Together, they were creating a ripple effect of kindness, proving that even the smallest acts of generosity could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And though she still faced challenges, Sarah no longer feared them. After all, she had already proven to herself and to the world that she was ready for whatever came next. Sarah's journey with the foundation continued to evolve, each passing month bringing new challenges and triumphs. The organization had grown significantly under her leadership, expanding its reach to regions she hadn't imagined possible when she first started. Yet with growth came complexity, more stakeholders to manage, larger budgets to oversee, and higher expectations to meet. It was exhilarating, but it also tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The weight of responsibility. 1. Of Sarah's biggest hurdles arose during a major initiative aimed at building sustainable housing for displaced families. The project was ambitious, involving partnerships with local governments, construction companies, and community leaders. On paper, everything looked perfect. The designs were innovative, the funding secure, and the timeline realistic. But reality rarely aligns with plans. When construction began, unforeseen complications surfaced almost immediately. Delays in material deliveries pushed back deadlines, while disagreements between contractors and local authorities threatened to derail the entire project. To make matters worse, some residents grew frustrated with the slow progress, accusing the foundation of broken promises. Sarah felt the pressure mounting. Nights became sleepless as she pored over reports trying to find solutions. Days blurred into a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and site visits. For the first time since taking the job, she questioned whether she was cut out for this level of responsibility. "You're doing great," Jonathan reassured her one evening after yet another long day. They were sitting in his office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and half-empty coffee cups. "But you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders alone." "I feel like I'm failing them," Sarah admitted, her voice heavy with frustration. "These families are counting on us and all they see is delay after delay." Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. "Failure isn't falling short, it's giving up. And I know you won't do that. Let's tackle this together." With Jonathan's guidance, Sarah decided to hold a town hall meeting with the affected communities. It was risky. Opening the floor to criticism could easily spiral out of control. But Sarah believed transparency was key to rebuilding trust. She prepared thoroughly, gathering updates from the construction team and drafting clear explanations for the delays. On the day of the meeting, Sarah stood nervously before a packed room. Faces filled with skepticism stared back at her, some arms crossed, others whispering among themselves. Taking a deep breath, she began by acknowledging their frustrations. "I know many of you feel let down, and I want you to know that we hear you," she said sincerely. "This project hasn't gone as smoothly as we hoped, but I promise you, we are committed to seeing it through." She then outlined the steps being taken to address the issues, including hiring additional crews to speed up construction and working closely with suppliers to prevent further delays. When she finished speaking, she invited questions, bracing herself for criticism. To her surprise, the response wasn't entirely negative. While some voiced their concerns loudly, others expressed gratitude for her honesty. One elderly woman stood up, tears in her eyes, and said, "Thank you for listening. We just need to know that someone cares." That moment stayed with Sarah long after the meeting ended. It reminded her why she had taken this job in the first place, not for accolades or recognition, but to make a tangible difference in people's lives. From that day forward, she made it a priority to maintain open lines of communication with beneficiaries, ensuring they always felt heard and valued. A test of trust. Another challenge came in the form of a high-profile donor who suddenly withdrew support midway through a critical fundraising campaign. The loss was devastating, leaving a gaping hole in the budget needed to sustain several ongoing projects. Panic rippled through the team, and for a brief moment, morale plummeted. Instead of panicking, Sarah called an emergency meeting. "We've faced setbacks before and we'll face them again," she told the group firmly. "What matters now is how we respond. Let's focus on finding creative solutions." Her calm demeanor steadied the team, and together they brainstormed ideas. Mia suggested hosting a virtual fundraiser, leveraging social media to reach a wider audience. Raj proposed reaching out to smaller donors, emphasizing the collective impact of individual contributions. Elena volunteered to connect with grassroots organizations that might be willing to collaborate. Sarah threw herself into the effort, spending late nights crafting compelling messages and recording heartfelt videos explaining the importance of the Foundation's work. Her authenticity resonated with viewers, sparking a wave of donations from people around the globe. By the end of the campaign, they had not only covered the shortfall, but exceeded their original goal. The experience taught Sarah an invaluable lesson. Resilience wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about adapting and persevering despite it. She emerged from the ordeal stronger and more confident in her ability to navigate adversity. Moments of joy. Amidst the challenges, there were moments of pure joy that reminded Sarah why she loved her work. One such moment occurred during the grand opening of a newly constructed school in a rural village. Children ran excitedly across the playground, their laughter echoing through the air. Parents gathered nearby, beaming with pride as they watched their kids step into classrooms equipped with modern technology and learning materials. As Sarah stood beside Jonathan, watching the scene unfold, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "This is what it's all about," she said softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. Jonathan smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Growth often comes with struggles, but look at what you've achieved here today." Later that evening, as you The sun dipped below the horizon. Sarah reflected on how far she'd come. When she first accepted the role, she doubted her abilities, fearing she wasn't qualified enough. Now, standing amidst the very people whose lives she had helped improve, she realized something important. Qualifications weren't what mattered most. What truly counted was her willingness to learn, adapt, and care deeply about the mission. Mentorship and legacy. As the foundation continued to thrive, Sarah began focusing on mentoring young professionals eager to make a difference. She remembered how daunting it had been to step into a leadership role without prior experience, so she made it a point to share her knowledge generously. Whether it was offering advice on managing teams or encouraging interns to pursue their passions, Sarah took pride in nurturing the next generation of changemakers. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for the Foundation's internship program, she came across a letter from a college student named Emma. In it, Emma described how a scholarship funded by the Foundation had enabled her to attend university. "Because of your work," she wrote, "I'm able to dream bigger than I ever thought possible." Reading those words brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It was a powerful reminder that the Foundation's impact extended far beyond immediate beneficiaries. It created ripples that touched countless lives in unexpected ways. Looking ahead. By the end of her third year, Sarah had transformed the Foundation into a beacon of hope and innovation. The organization's reputation attracted top talent, generous donors, and influential partners, allowing them to tackle even larger-scale projects. Yet, Sarah remained grounded, never losing sight of the values that had guided her from the beginning. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be obstacles to overcome and lessons to learn. But she also knew she wasn't alone. With a dedicated team by her side and a mentor like Jonathan cheering her on, Sarah felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As she sat in her office one evening, gazing at the city skyline illuminated by twinkling lights, Sarah allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She thought about the man who couldn't afford a cup of coffee, the note slipped under her door, and the leap of faith that had led her here. Life had a funny way of connecting dots in ways no one could predict. And though the journey was far from over, Sarah knew one thing for certain. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change lives, including her own. Years had passed since Sarah Harper first stepped into the role of leading Jonathan Monroe's charitable foundation. What began as a leap of faith, a decision fueled by compassion and curiosity, had blossomed into a legacy that touched countless lives, including her own. The foundation was now a household name, synonymous with innovation, empathy, and transformative change. Yet for Sarah, the true measure of success wasn't in the accolades or the numbers. It was in the stories of hope she witnessed every day. The ripple effect. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah found herself standing outside a community center funded by the foundation. The building buzzed with activity, children laughing as they played basketball, adults attending workshops on financial literacy, and volunteers serving hot meals to those in need. It was a place where dreams were nurtured and struggles eased, a testament to what collective effort could achieve. As Sarah walked through the bustling space, she noticed a young woman quietly helping a struggling mother pay for groceries at a nearby store. The scene struck a chord deep within her. It was eerily reminiscent of her own act of kindness years ago when she had bought a stranger a cup of coffee. Smiling to herself, Sarah approached the young woman after the transaction was complete. "Hi," Sarah said warmly, extending her hand. "I couldn't help but notice what you did back there. That was really thoughtful." The young woman, caught off guard, blushed slightly. "Oh, it was nothing," she replied modestly. "She just looked like she needed a little help." Sarah nodded, understanding the sentiment all too well. Sometimes those small gestures mean more than we realize. "My name's Sarah, by the way." "I'm Emily," the young woman said, shaking Sarah's hand. "Nice to meet you." They chatted briefly, and Sarah learned that Emily was a college student juggling part-time jobs to support her family. Despite her own challenges, she made time to volunteer at the community center and assist others whenever she could. Her selflessness reminded Sarah so much of herself at that age. eager to make a difference, even if it meant starting small. Before parting ways, Sarah handed Emily her business card. "If you're ever looking for opportunities to do more," she said with an encouraging smile, "give me a call. We're always looking for passionate people like you." Emily accepted the card, her eyes lighting up with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll definitely keep that in mind." As Sarah watched Emily walk away, she felt a surge of pride. This was the ripple effect in action, the idea that one act of kindness could inspire another, creating a chain reaction of goodwill. It was humbling to think that her simple gesture years ago had sparked something far greater than she could have imagined. A mentor turned friend over the years, Sarah's relationship with Jonathan had evolved from mentor-mentee to a genuine friendship. They shared countless memories, celebrating milestones, navigating crises, and dreaming up new initiatives together. Jonathan often joked that hiring Sarah was the best decision he'd ever made, not just for the foundation, but for himself. "You've taught me as much as I've taught you," Jonathan told her one evening over dinner. They were seated at their favorite cafe, the same spot where they'd first met. "You reminded me why I started this journey in the first place," Sarah laughed, raising her glass in a toast. "Well, you gave me a chance when no one else would. I owe everything to you." Their bond extended beyond work. Jonathan became a confidant, someone Sarah could turn to during tough times. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own, and offered unwavering support when she faced setbacks. In many ways, he was the family she never knew she needed. When Jonathan announced his plans to step back from active involvement in the foundation, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: pride in how far they'd come, sadness at the thought of losing his daily presence, and excitement for the future. "You've built something incredible here," he told her during their final meeting. "As colleagues, now it's your turn to carry the torch." Though Jonathan's departure marked the end of an era, it also signaled a new chapter for Sarah. She was ready to lead the foundation independently, armed with the lessons he had imparted and the confidence she had gained along the way. Paying it forward, under Sarah's continued leadership, the foundation reached unprecedented heights. Innovative programs addressing mental health, climate resilience, and economic empowerment were launched, each designed with input from the communities they served. The organization's emphasis on collaboration ensured that every project was sustainable and impactful. But perhaps Sarah's greatest achievement was the culture of kindness she cultivated within the foundation. Employees and volunteers alike were encouraged to prioritize empathy, creativity, and teamwork. Regular training sessions focused not just on skills, but on fostering a mindset of service. Sarah believed that true change began with individuals who cared deeply about the world around them. Her efforts paid off in unexpected ways. Former beneficiaries of the foundation often returned to volunteer, eager to give back to the organization that had helped them. Others, inspired by the foundation's mission, started their own initiatives, amplifying its reach exponentially. Sarah took pride in knowing that the foundation wasn't just solving problems. It was empowering people to become agents of change themselves. Reflections on life's journey. A quiet Sunday afternoon, Sarah sat in her cozy apartment, flipping through a scrapbook filled with photos and mementos from her time at the foundation. There were pictures of smiling children at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, handwritten thank you notes from grateful families, and snapshots of team celebrations. Each page told a story of perseverance, growth, and humanity. As she paused on a photo of herself and Jonathan taken during the early days of the foundation, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. From a struggling graphic designer unsure of her purpose to a leader making a tangible impact, her journey was proof that life's detours often led to the most beautiful destinations. She thought about the man in the cafe, the catalyst for everything that followed, and marveled at how fate worked in mysterious ways. That single moment of kindness had set off a chain reaction, transforming not only her life, but the lives of countless others. It was a reminder that goodness existed in the world, even in the smallest gestures. Closing the scrapbook, Sarah smiled to herself. She didn't know what the future held, but she was certain of one thing. She would continue paying it forward, inspiring others to embrace kindness and create ripples of their own. A legacy of kindness. Years later, when Sarah finally decided to retire, the foundation she had poured her heart into stood as a beacon of hope and resilience. Its programs had touched millions, its values ingrained in the hearts of those it served. But more importantly, it had ignited a movement, a belief that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, had the power to make a difference. At her farewell ceremony, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and beneficiaries, Sarah delivered a heartfelt speech. "When I first joined this foundation, I wasn't sure I belonged here," she admitted. "But I quickly realized that belonging isn't about titles or qualifications. It's about showing up, caring deeply, and believing in the possibility of change." She paused, scanning the room filled with faces she had grown to love. "Every one of you has taught me something valuable. You've shown me that kindness is contagious, that compassion can move mountains, and that together, we are capable of extraordinary things." As applause erupted, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had started this journey with nothing but a desire to help, and now she left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. In the end, Sarah understood that life's greatest rewards came not from personal achievements but from the connections we forged and the lives we touched. And though her story might fade with time, the ripple effect of her kindness would continue to spread, inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. Because sometimes all it takes is a single act of generosity to change the world, one person at a time.